A franchisor should not rely on revenue from the sales of licenses, right? Like franchise sales or franchise development, because a healthy franchise system should be earning enough or generating enough revenue through their royalties.
Welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Each episode takes a deep dive into the franchise space and explores how the biggest and best brands handle national branding, franchise development, employee recruitment, and localized marketing on a daily basis. This podcast is brought to you by Netsertive, a localized digital marketing partner for franchise networks. Netsertive's Madeleine Park talks shop with franchise executives to discuss what's working, what's not, and answers the question, what else can you be doing to excel at the art of franchise marketing?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Today we have Erica Tarnowski, the Franchise Development Manager at Unity Road. Erica, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited because I think your brand is amazing. And for people who don't know what it is, I will let you get into it, but it's definitely making waves in the space and something that is much sexier, I would say, than a necessary, home services or senior care. No offense to anyone out there, including myself, but this is a really great one. So Erica, why don't you tell us a little bit about Unity Road and, how you got into franchise and marketing?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the goal of our brand when we started it was just to be sexy. So I'm glad that we are achieving that. I'm glad we're really hitting those targets that we set out for ourselves. So Unity Road, we are the first cannabis dispensary franchise that was created really to bridge the gap between franchising and cannabis. So with industry we all know the benefits of franchising, right? I mean, I imagine several people that listen to this podcast are either exploring, franchising or already involved in it. So we get it. We know that the mutual benefits that it brings. But, cannabis is such a difficult industry to navigate. It's really one of those where we're sort of building the plane as we're flying it, right? Because new rules and regulations are coming out every day. New states are opening up. And so there's a lot of things to know and a lot of things to keep up on. And so for franchisees or people looking to get into cannabis, there's also, challenges with licensing and competing against sort of these bigger multi-state operators, which we call MSOs. You'll hear me sort of mention them occasionally, but MSOs that, really just have the buying power in the real estate side and things like that. And can really grab up market opportunities a lot quicker. So we're there to help those people who want to get into this but really have no viable path forward, and give them an opportunity to have the sort of highest likelihood of getting in and being successful.
So what was the thought process behind Unity Road? And I understand that, the goal is to bridge the gap between cannabis and franchising, which is great. Unity Road, that, aligns very well. But I imagine that the legalities and the potential of difficulty selling and being the first, what made you guys really just want to go for it?
So either we are a bunch of stupid people, a bunch of crazy people, or maybe some combination of both. I don't know. Or maybe the smartest. I don't I'm not sure yet. It's the jury's still out. But really at the end of the day, the people who started the company, Mike Weinberger, who is our chief franchise officer, is, still with us, still very heavily involved, obviously, with it. And really their vision was to build something that nobody else has built before, right? And uh, with it's funny because several years ago, I had a mentor and I asked him at one point, I said, "Why isn't anybody doing cannabis franchise yet?" And he goes, it's so hard. Like, there's no financing, all the states, there's only a certain number of states open." I was like, I mean, still, now that I'm in it, I'm like, "Huh, now I understand why not everybody has done this." That makes a lot of sense now. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You actually touched on something interesting, like from the franchise development or sales perspective. In 2021, at the end of 2020, New Jersey legalized recreational. And then in the first month I think, of 2021, 4 more states legalized recreational. So last year was very sexy here for the
Yeah.
cannabis industry. This year has been quite different because those big sort of exciting states, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New Mexico, those were, they're now rolling out their rules and regulations. Some of them have started licensing, some of them have actually opened up. I think New York's going to be a big market, but it's been such a challenge because they're taking their time. And so a lot of what we do and where we can go and the pace at which we can go there depends a lot on legislators. And it can be really, really difficult and trying at times. So one of the things I always say to candidates or, consultants is when they say, what makes a good candidate? I say they need to have three things: access to a lot of cash, patience, and flexibility. And so it's funny in saying that all the time, trying to sort of live that and remember it and integrate it into our, my own life for sure in this industry is even more tough.
So you say it must have a lot of cash. What do the startup costs look like?
So we're looking at, we require that people have access to at least 1 million liquid. So obviously the barriers to entry are quite quite a bit higher than several other brands. You know,
Pays to be
network obviously. Say it again?
it pays to be sexy, you know?
Yeah. If you want to get in on this, you gotta show the green, so to speak. So yeah, I get asked a lot, why does it cost so much? What is the, what is that all about? Right. I've done retail spaces. I can, build me out for a lot less. And you know what? Honestly, it's based mostly on our experiences in Colorado. And so I tell people all the time, like, if you can do it for less, great. We don't want you to get caught, halfway into a build out and not be able to get any financing or lending or any access to capital, you know, halfway through. I mean, how much worse would that be, right? So this industry, even in, the past few years, a very short amount of time, even banking and lending has started to progress. And so we're hoping, I have some calls next week, maybe with some potential lending partners that we can work with. But it's all state chartered banks, credit unions, no federally accredited banks will lend or accept funds in cannabis. So what is fun and interesting about this industry too is it's an opportunity for you to be creative, right? And I like to say too that we're a team of people who like to play in the gray. So where the black and white exists, there's always a gray area that, is really where the opportunity lies. And that's what we focus on.
That's very cool. So just to clarify, any federal, bank lending, all of that, they won't lend to cannabis companies. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
Yeah, so because
Wow.
it's illegal on a federal level, there's no SBA back loans. And so, yeah, basically any bank that has their accreditation through the Fed, they can't play in the cannabis space yet. Now,
Yeah.
the federal government, one of the bills that is, passing through Congress right now, it's being sort of mulled over, I guess I would say, is the Safe Banking Act. So we are looking at the potential for banking as the first step toward federal legalization. There are several, I think, phases that it will go through, but that's a big one, and that's there's a big push for that.
Yeah. So for all of our listeners out there, franchise or especially, I don't want to hear it when you say you have issues with banks because Unity Road's out here
Yeah,
being like,
come on.
it's literally illegal to do business with us. So you think you've got obstacles, which,
Yeah, yeah.
that kind of, we've already started talking about obstacles. But my next question is, what is that franchise development pipeline look like? Because, like you said, you can only really do it in certain states. You don't have the national backed lending, but it is such a fun industry and so many people believe in it. But I would imagine it also takes a certain, person to be passionate about that and want to do that. So does that like lighten your pipeline? What
Yeah.
does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And, Yeah, this is not for the faint of heart. Like you kind of put it
Mm.
perfectly, that it's not for everybody, which is sort of, I guess, what makes it sexy or attractive to a lot of people. And the early adoption piece of it is exciting because they're, y- I mean, I don't know if you've ever read Malcolm Gladwell or The Tipping Point or anything and that listen to it or anything.
Yes.
I'm like listening to it right now. I'm like most of the way through it, but he talks about all these different like classes of adopters, and the early adopters are really they're at that phase. I would actually say is almost over. We're like in that sort of second. Okay, these people have suffered the most. They've proven enough that I can get interested in this, and so that's where we're at. There are now 38 states, I believe, that have legalized cannabis for medical use or medicinal. And there are, I believe, now 18 or 19 states that have legalized recreational. So when I talked about earlier, the 5 states that legalized last year, earlier this year, Mississippi legalized medical, and they just started licensing. So we're all like, woohoo! And then the other state that legalized just 2 weeks ago, legalized for recreational use is Rhode Island. So I now officially live in the last state in New England that has not legalized recreational use. New Hampshire island, if you look at the map, it's just our own little island of, they're all like green around and
Is
it's like,
it live free or die?
well, yes, I live free or die trying, or live free or die island, or whatever you want to call it, Dyland, if you will. So not only that, right? So you have the majority of states that have legalized this, at least on some level, right? But big but, not all of them are licensing. Even the recreational states, not all of them are offering licensing. Some of them, and every state is different. I always feel like a broken record when I say that. Every state is different. So New York is different from New Jersey, is different from Connecticut, and Massachusetts, Maine, Colorado,
Mhm.
California, Washington, Oregon, etc. They all require different things. Some of them capped licensing, some of them didn't. Oklahoma, this is something people go, what? Oklahoma has more dispensaries than any other state by like a fair amount. They have over 2,000.
Oh,
They have only legalized medical. Mhm. They are really the only true free market sort of in cannabis because here's the other thinger. There are no qualifying conditions in the state for a medical card. So it's essentially recreational disguised as medical. And somehow they've managed to do a phenomenal job getting away with it. So when I talk about, the gray area, that is an area of gray for sure. It's funny because they talk about legalizing recreational, and I'm like, why? It's basically recreational as
what?
it is. Yeah.
So
So yeah,
could
those are the biggest challenges.
could Unity Road be only medical? Like, could you open a dispensary and just do
Yep.
medical?
Yep. And you could open it
Okay,
and just be
perfect.
recreational because, states have different laws, right? So sometimes you have to have separate buildings. Sometimes you have to, in most cases, you have to get licensed separately. I know that in Massachusetts, it takes like an extra year to get, in most cases to get approved for medical. So, it's really just whatever whatever makes the most sense in the market.
And for on the consumer side, can all states or just some states, can they take credit cards? I know when there was a dispensary in Boston that was near where I lived, and it was cash only. So
Yeah.
and that was the by law. So I'm just curious if you can do both.
Yeah, so we actually have managed to use cashless ATM. So it's almost like debit. You can use debit cards at a lot of our locations because it's basically cash, right? So either you take it out of the ATM at the location because pretty much every location has an ATM as well, or you can use that, right? So there's some places in the Massachusetts market that do take debit cards. It's just up to the individual owners. But yeah, it basically has to be essentially a cashless ATM.
So then, well, you're not dealing with credit card processing fees, so that's good.
That is correct. So hey, there's your savings
You
right
got
there. Real estate's hard, financing's impossible, but yeah.
we don't have
But maybe that's 3% or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Well, obviously, you guys have, franchising obstacles times a million, but you're still paving the way. And I know that there'll be a million brands following in your footsteps. And a lot of people, myself included, that are very grateful for, your product and the ability to have access to it, not only for recreational, but I'm a very high functioning anxiety person. And to the point of like debilitating panic attacks. I'm not just
Yeah.
talking like, oh, I have anxiety,
Ugh,
like I can't
I
breathe.
don't like going to
States.
parties. Like, well, no. Yeah.
Yes. No, it's like legitimate, like, "Oh, I'm gonna faint and throw up, and here we go again." So, it's a thing, it's a thing.
I know.
So,
I know.
yeah, let's talk about, why should people come to your brand? Tell me all of the good that is around cannabis because in the industry, because I think a lot of people assume, oh, it's drugs. Oh, you're going to get high. Oh, all of the silly things that, our parents told us or
All
the,
the best reasons.
all the best,
Kidding.
maybe the short lived benefits. But for someone looking into cannabis or, potentially a private equity group thinking this might be a great addition to our portfolio one
Mhm.
day, walk me through that and what
Yeah.
the growth.
Yeah. Cause yeah, I mean, I joke a lot about all of the challenges and hurdles we face, but like, that's the reason that we're here, right? Is to help people through those hurdles because they're really challenging and going through it several times over and over and, building a team of people that has, thick skin, I guess, is is really nice to have. So, first of all, we talked about the early adopter thing, right? And so anybody getting in at this point in time is still, I would still consider, like I said, not maybe not in first, very first group, but still an early adopter,
Yeah.
right? And so where there is greater risk comes much greater reward. And so we're looking at, revenues unlike anything, people really have ever seen before. Um, the reason I was so excited to get into this industry is because there are very few times, and this is another motivator for a lot of people. There are very few times in our lives that we get the opportunity to experience a true growth industry. And
Mhm.
even rarer still is the opportunity to have an impact on it, right? To influence something for years to come, whether or not you're remembered for that, whether or not anybody knows who you are, you have helped build something that nobody else has had done before you. And so it's a really amazing opportunity to do that without having to do it on your own, right? I had a guy call me from Michigan several months ago, and he left a message, told me his name was one thing, but the caller ID said another thing. And so when I called him back, I said, "Hey, why do you use a different name?" And he said, "Because I've been in cannabis so long that when I started, everybody had a different name. You didn't use your real name." And I was like, "Okay, I got it." And he said he had started and built two dispensaries. They had an edibles company and the Michigan market. They ended up selling both of those off to another company, including the real estate that went with it. And he said so their 2-year non-compete was ending and he wanted to get back into this. And I was like,
Hmm.
"Well, excuse me, sir, but you seem to have a lot of experience here. Why are you calling me? Why would you reach out to a brand like ours?" And he said, "Because it's so hard. I want to do this again because I love it, but I want a group of people that I can count on as a support team to help me navigate all those, complexities." And I was like, "Well, enough said, like, I am so happy that
Yeah,
you."
and for
Yeah, right. I was just like, exactly. I think I called like the whole team immediately. It was like, "Okay, we're doing it. Like, we're doing the right thing. People are excited about it. Like even people meet us. This is so exciting." And so that's a really, amazing piece of this is to be able to get into this again without going it on your own. And so even people who have, you know, been in the industry for decades are still looking for that support, and that's where we come in. So that's really awesome it's really awesome for us, right? So we're super dedicated obviously to our success, but also the success of our franchisees. But, uh, just people coming in who have no idea what they're walking into, it's just something to think about. And if you're looking for something that is different, that is the challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs I think seek in their lives, it's certainly the opportunity for you.
And you get a franchise, and
And
you get a
how
franchise.
much money do you owe? No franchise for you.
Well, talk to me about culture because, you've got this, you're paving the way, like you said, this is high risk, high reward, gonna take thick skin, really kind of that hustle mentality. But at the same time, you have a product that, for lack of better words, just makes people happy. So,
Yeah.
how guys create the culture where that all kind of ties together? Because I think a lot of times with franchising, we see people who come in and they want to be handheld and they need that. And you've got the squeaky wheels that are complaining right and left. And then you've got
Mhm,
the people that can go off and do it on their own. So,
mhm.
how are you guys making all of those fragmented pieces come together in one and really be united for Unity Road?
Yeah. Well, we have a very, very strong and incredible company culture. Our team is, like I'd mentioned, the people who are here, who are doing this, who, have been at least for the past year or two, sort of forged ahead and maintained their excitement about this. Because like,
Mhm.
neither side is for everyone, right? The franchisee side and the franchisor side, it's not for everyone. And so the people that have kind of stuck around, hung out, despite all obstacles, just continued to push forward and drive this thing. So we have that, right? We're cheering for our own success. We're cheering for the success of the people who are there to adopt, as we have. Culture is very important to us, and it's extremely important in this industry because for so long, it was just a subculture, a counterculture, right? Where the only way you could sort of penetrate that is if you were really deep in it, right? If you were somehow involved, got involved on your own, were super passionate. A lot of people who were, again, the first adopters were growing pot in their basement, like they didn't have concept like a lot of, they understood like the humidity factor and the lighting and all that stuff, but like the large scale grows and things like that were, pipe dreams, right? And so as those things became a reality and people did it together, they grew this network of people who are in the community, right? And so what I found to be really interesting is, you know, out in Colorado, we've identified a lot of opportunities for acquisitions of other
Mhm.
dispensaries, people who are looking to sell,
Sure.
ready to sort of move on to the next chapter, or retire and live in the Maldives because they've made their millions in cannabis, and they're just like, bye, hey buddy, my oldest just got home. And then so I'm in, New Hampshire and Massachusetts, like, you know, our team out there was kind of like, "We're just not really sure what's going on there." And I was like, "Well, I'm here now." And so I've just kind of dug in and I've now made connections with people, just going to an event and meeting so and so led to being on a networking call with a group and get that led to other, side calls. And now I have people. So it's funny because a lot of the potential deals that arise can come from these types of places and these types of relationships. And so the culture of our company is very strong and, really it's very important to us, but the culture of the industry is even, it's just oh, there he is. It's just very different than anything else, right? And so it's important for people to keep in mind that this isn't like, you know, else on another interview I did said it's not Subway, and I was like, well, that's rude, but it's not Subway, right? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a QSR concept. It's not a, self like health and beauty, wellness. It's, I guess you could put it under that, but it's not home, it's not healthcare, it's not anything like that. It's very, very different. And to sort of become part of that culture takes time
Yeah, and
and dedication.
that's a true testament to what leaning in, lean in where there's give. And two, I see so much now of, Fran Dev and vendors trying to partner with franchises of they just think that they can go to a conference, talk to someone once, and they're gonna sign a contract. I'm like,
Deals
one,
yeah,
it doesn't that's not how things work, and let alone in franchising. Like,
right,
you guys gotta be good people to be connected with good people. So I think that there's just like we kind of coach our franchisors on, you can't just send out a newspaper ad and know you're gonna get 150 clients from it anymore. It's
right,
just fragmented. It's not gonna work. Same
right,
thing for relationships and brand dev. There's so many options and so many people, and everyone's moving at hyper speed that it really takes time and focus on creating those good relationships, which leads me into, kind of our last topic, which is what do you do to fill your pipeline? Because I think you have a little bit of or a lot of it of a different approach because most people say, "Oh, give me the brokers, give me the lead portals, give me PPC, and I'm going to wait for them all to come in and I've got, all
yeah.
the states and area in the world." So how does it work for you guys?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, first of all, there's a challenge, we face right off the bat with any advertising, whether it's, B2C or B2B on platforms like Facebook or Google because of their advertising policies, right? So they are very
Sure.
strict on what they allow and what they don't allow and making sure that, it's very similar almost to alcohol, right? So you're not supposed to target anybody in over 21. Funny enough, LinkedIn is actually a very I wouldn't say it's a lead source, but it's a great source for us to share our information about what's happening with the company and our growth. And, we merged with a cultivation arm, the brand or the company last, I think it was March or April 2001. Sorry, 2021. And last year in 2001.
Listen,
Last time I graduated from high school in 2021, and so we have this whole other sort of piece of the company, right? And so there's a lot of exciting things happening with that, and I mean our goal is to get that out to the world, right? But through that, people are hopefully learning about the brand, educating themselves. I mean, I it's amazing how many people I used to talk to when I started a year ago who were just like how do we do this? And what states are legal? And, you know, I don't want to move. And when can I get my And I was like, okay, let's just take a step back. Where do you live, sir? It's just like, no, that's not going to work. And so, and now I get people calling. They're like, well, I looked over your stuff. I read through your site. I like what I've seen. What I know about you guys. I need you to sort of fill in the gaps and tell me more. And okay, great. Some people are looking to get in really quickly. Some people aren't. So there's a lot of education that comes along with it. So we do a lot organically. We also work with, like franchising.com. We go to conferences all the time. We do email blasts, which are phenomenal. I've always touted email blasts as a great source of qualified leads. But we
you
also
might
work with,
be the only you might be the only one
oh,
because
I love
email
email
blasts
blasts.
work for a lot of people, but
That's true.
clearly Unity Roads got the key to
It's
success.
true. Well, and in my previous life at 919, email blast drove, I mean, for all the brands I worked with, I think maybe except for one or two, but I think, out of the, I don't know, 2 dozen brands that were there for franchise development, we did a lot with email blast and they were very successful. So yeah, it could be a brand thing, but getting back to this life, we also work with a lot of broker groups. So we have relationships with FCC, ISPG, BAI, and most recently FBA. We also work with a group called Cannabis 10X. They focus specifically on that sort of relationship building within the cannabis industry and getting, sort of bringing several parties together and identifying opportunities for connections. So we just started with them not too long ago. So, it's still sort of in that ramping up phase, but we do get a lot of good candidates from brokers and from our website, right? The organic traffic. And honestly, the best lead source is again the legislators when they announce that a state is going to open up recreational. You see our CRM, it just says seriously, like Virginia last year. I was like, oh my God, yeah, New Jersey, Virginia, New York. Yep, craziness.
Like,
Craziness.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I imagine there's also people out there just waiting for the legislation to pass so that they can get started on their business ownership. And what would you want to say to veteran brands, veteran people in the franchise space that, kind of see a cannabis brand and turn the other way because they're just not sure if, cannabis belongs in franchising or, if your brand's here to say, what would you say to them
I would
besides,
say,
yeah,
well, if I were to speak politely, I would probably say the green revolution is coming, whether you want to accept it at this point or not. It will be falling in your lap before you know it. And again, the early adopters and the people who, accept and appreciate are the ones that are going to be, I guess, rewarded, right? Uh, for the most part.
yeah,
Especially, as new different products start to come onto the market, right? There's a huge consumer segment that, I mean, and growing rapidly. They're called, we call them canna curious, right? They're people who have maybe used once or twice before when they were younger and are kind of getting back into it and don't necessarily know what they like. Are you taking that? It's a good one. The other one is you could say like connoisseur, like a connoisseur. But really, this day and age, it's almost like people you talk to are almost need to be like sommelier in the franchise, like I'm sorry, in the cannabis space. And so, training is a big part of this and all that stuff too. But I mean, like I said, the green revolution is coming. This is spreading quickly. I get asked a lot about the stigma, and I'm like, of course it's still there. Of course it still exists. But I think 50% or so of the population have access because in the states that it's legal, they're, the biggest, most populous states. And once New York starts, I mean, they've legalized. So you go to New York City, it's quite prevalent all over the side. Like you smell it a lot. I was just there a couple weeks ago. And, so over 50% of the population now has, or people 21 and over now have access to recreational cannabis. You know, if you wanna keep the old school mentality, that's fine. It's a plant, it's like you said, it helps a lot of people and, like, I just I don't think that there not only is there no stopping it, at this point, it'd be like trying to, like, roll an avalanche back into a snowball or something, but, like, it's and again, not everybody needs to accept it, not everybody needs to accept alcohol, right, or whatnot. I mean, again, in the franchising space, we saw an opportunity to fill a gap that needed to be, you know, filled. And it wasn't for fame, glory, anything like that. It was really to help people and help blaze that trail or whatever because because somebody was going to, right? Like somebody's gonna do this and the earlier we can do it, the better. And yeah, it's I want to tell them to just because if they don't like it, they don't have to do it. I don't, if they're not
right.
into it, that's okay with me. There are plenty of other people who are, so
And I think what you said before is really great is and what everyone in franchising can connect with is that you did it to help people, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's your candidates, whatever it is, you're in it to help people. And that's why you belong in franchising. And I think that that's really great. And we are
yeah.
up on time, but I have two final questions to ask you. The first being, how do you define success as a franchisor? And does that differ from how you define success as a franchisee?
So I'm going to start with your second question because no, they are the same exact thing. I've said that from day one. I always find it amazing when brands have, like the sort of franchisee franchisor relationship that's like this and very, filled with tension and animosity and things like that. I think the success of a franchisor comes when and I don't know if there's a tipping point, right? I think that there is, success is continued growth, right? And whether it's an upward or just really sort of gradually upward, steady sort of growth curve, I guess. But I think it's really when you have a system of franchisees or franchise partners or franchise owners or whatever your brand calls them who are happy, who feel heard, feel listened to, right? And a franchisor that can respond to their needs, adapt, adjust, pivot, whatever all those fun buzzwords we used during the start of the pandemic. But really, I mean, I saw it. It was so great to watch during, again, the start of the pandemic when, it was heartbreaking for small independent business owners, but for franchisees and franchise brands who had these teams behind them that literally leapt to action and pushed things through so that, apps that were 6 months out from development were completed in 6 weeks or 4 weeks. And, suddenly they changed their model to fit, the needs of their customers. And that to me, if your brand can do that, it pandemic or not, then you're successful, I think. So that's what I would say. I mean, obviously there's some cash in there, but if you're happy and your franchisees are happy, then that comes with it.
That's really great. Yeah, and it is true. I was on the franchisor side when the pandemic started, and we went from, just typical day-to-day large scale operations to we were having full scale, home office team and every franchisee on calls 3 times a week. I
Yep.
was handling the local PR for every single location, just doing as much as we can and knowing that even like, some of our franchisees were attorneys in previous lives or current financial advisors. They're on the call going, here's how we navigate PPP loans and knowing that a lot of mom and pop businesses didn't have that or the franchise systems that, didn't put a focus on satisfaction and culture that really kind of shone through. So very grateful and lucky to have franchisees like yourself that are really there for their franchisees. And that's, the essence of franchising.
Totally agree.
Finally, what one piece of advice you would give to a corporate franchisor team and what's one piece of advice you'd give to a franchisee?
To a franchisor team, I think I would say something that actually Linda Chadwick, who was the person who brought me into franchising, CEO at
Love,
Rita's,
love
Italian
her.
Ice. Yeah. She brought me into this and she brought me into development, gave me a chance, like took a chance on me, gave me a shot. Thank you, Linda, if you're listening to this, which, it's fine if you're not, but I do want to say thank you. And one of the things she told me very early and that has stuck with me since is a franchisor should not rely on revenue from the sales of licenses, right? Like franchise sales or franchise development, because a healthy franchise system should be, earning enough or generating enough revenue through their royalties. And I was like, okay,
Mm.
that's interesting, right? And I believe that. I think it's true. Maybe early on, yeah, absolutely. Like, obviously, because you're starting up and you're getting people in the door and things like that. So you're not going to have any royalties coming in, but and obviously like the goal is to grow a healthy, sustainable system where you're not going to get sued all the time. You're not going to have a lot of squeaky wheels, right? You're not going to have people wanting to leave your system, people unhappy with your team, people unhappy with everything that you've worked to build for them because it's just not worth it. It's not worth bringing them on. It's not worth the headache and the time and the dedication that you have to now take away from happy franchisees to put into that, right? And as a franchisee, I think if you're pursuing what you want, right? Short-term, long-term goals, you're within arm's reach of them, whether or not, I mean, I don't know, sometimes people have crazy, outrageous goals, but if you are sort of on that path and you're happy and you're pleased with your franchisor and, or I mean, honestly, at least you feel heard if there is something that needs to change in your system and, you're generating revenue, right? You're seeing a good return then, that I think should define success for a franchisee. But, there's a certain level of obviously where you can lean on the franchisor, I think, for support. But a big portion of this that is, we're trying to teach people to fish, right? Not fish for them. And
Yeah.
so creating fishermen or fisher people is kind of, what our, the goal of it. And so as, a franchisee, if you're growing and you're, thriving and happy doing it, then I think you're successful.
That's great. Thank you so much, Erica, for coming on. That's a great place to end. I feel like I could talk to you all day, but
I
maybe we
know.
could next Please.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Guys, connect with Erica Tarnowski on LinkedIn. She's doing incredible things in the space and for franchising. And you can find more about Unity Road on unityroad.com. That's unityrd.com. And of course, stop in one of the stores near you. And if you do, because it's not legal in Pennsylvania yet, you'll hear it from me. All right, Erica, thank you again.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Franchise Marketing. This show is brought to you by Netsertive. We help franchise brands and multi-location businesses run localized digital marketing at scale. To learn more, visit netsertive.com.